got this bottom set too. Hold up. And it says the hangout on air is live. We are live. Take out the bottom grill. All right. So let me just recap on what just happened. I just got out of my bed. I'm trying to meet my quota of getting someone to agree to talk to me about something related to software. I don't have an agenda, even though I kind of have a high level idea of what we may talk about, because I do know something about you. And so I sent you a Facebook message. You said, asking you, hey, you want to record a conversation with me? And you're like, okay, when? And I was like, now. And you're like, I'm in the car, but I can talk about Azure. I was like, all right. And then like 5 minutes later, we are talking.
Yep.
Spontaneous. So, you on your way to work? Are you off today, or it's not?
I'm on my way to client site. So.
Okay, cool. And
do you see my video, or is it only my mic?
I see your profile. It doesn't show your actual video. It shows your infamous web image.
Yeah, I'm going to be changing that soon.
I like it. It looks good. It's older. I think you probably had that for probably the past 4 years.
I think that's been up for about 8 years. So I'm getting ready to take another photo shoot so that I can replace it.
Okay.
But that's a long. My picture is out in so many places that I've got to go through and do a cleansing and figure out where it's all at and get it all updated and that sort of thing.
Is it really necessary though? Like, I mean, for people that probably haven't talked to you in person, like that's still your brand. That's your trademark. Is your photo that is distributed all throughout the internet, right? Do you think you're going to freak humans out by like updating it?
I'm pretty sure it's going to cause some people to freak out a bit, but then it's kind of one of those things. Everything has to change at some point. So I got to go out and do a rebranding real quick and get all that stuff done. So I don't think it'll be as bad as other stuff, but yeah, it is an iconic thing that people recognize. So we'll see how that goes.
I remember about a year and a half ago, I had paid. She was the amateur photographer. Hopefully, she's not watching this video. But I tossed her like I think like $180 to do a photo shoot, pretty much paying her for her time, and that generated the infamous photo that I use on the internet. I'm okay with that one. The other one, I'm not photogenic, man. I'm too dark. I'm too dark for a camera to capture what I look like. So like, I hate every photo I take looks greasy. You know, right now I got lights bouncing off of my sweat, but whatever. It's interesting that you said you could talk about Azure. Usually I'm like, yo, this conversation is a conversation. There's no, I got money on this couch. There's no agenda. But it's interesting because I almost bought a book on Azure yesterday. And the reason was because I was listening to a YouTube video, simpleprogrammer.com, John Sames, and he was talking about how, you know, there's just a lot of new developers coming in every year, and it's like doubling every couple of years, the number of people that call themselves programmers. And so ultimately, you know, it's just not the States, it's just not Australia, it's just not England, right? There's people that are in other areas of the planet that are charging lower rates. And, you know, one would argue that, you know, where first world countries are now having to prove themselves even more. But to make a long story short, the reason why I brought up John Sames, Simple Programmer, was he was advising that at this day and age, that there's higher expectations of people that work in these first world countries, in which it's not enough to just write code. If we want to maintain, the I don't know, the six-figure salary that we have, whether you're at 120,000, 150,000, or a couple 100,000. You have to level up, and you have to basically, again, differentiate yourself from everybody else. And now, you got to be a boss, right? And you have to put together solutions. You have to be a solutions provider, a solutions integrator, for lack of a better term. It's not enough to write code. And I think when you and I have had conversations, it sounds a lot like what you used to tell me too. It's like, yo, you got to level up. If you want more money, you got to deliver complete solutions. It's not enough to just write C sharp or do a client, Android mobile application. You got to do infrastructure. Does that make sense? Did I capture that right?
Yep. Well, you have to think about it. So I'll give you twofold. The biggest reason I can currently talk and discuss about Azure in more in depth is on October 1st I was awarded a Microsoft MVP in Azure. So I was
I saw the
recognized.
Facebook post.
I was
Congrats.
Yes, I was actually recognized for the work I've been doing in Azure. It is a unique structure. I mean, I think in our past I talked to you before that I grew up in the arena to where I was a network guy. I ran cable. I set up servers. I was on a help desk. I did all of the right stuff while going through school. And then I made a transition over to developer, and then started developing applications pretty unique at the time. Like I had started making a an application that could program Cisco routers on the fly, and doing different things. As I grew up, and then when I moved over to the solution architecture or enterprise architecture arena, it became real easy to transition into a fact because you kind of understood the basics. It's like being a football coach. Once you understand the fundamentals, you can pretty much do whatever you want. Create all sorts of trick plays and tips and tricks and all that sort of stuff. So, as Azure came up, in our discussions in the past, I think I told you that the generalist is where everything's heading again. We spent time throughout our software industry where they really wanted people to focus and be specialists in different arenas. You are a web dev, you are this. But as we emerge into the new world and we start seeing, compute time as a service, and we start looking at all of these things that we've never had before, where really computers are now becoming a utility over a needed or single facet. The world is ever changing, and now we're looking at the things of like DevOps. So now we're getting into the arena where we've got developers working on the operational side. So it's not just anymore being a dev or an SDAT or this, that, or the other thing, or whatever label they want to put at us, for this week. It's more of, how do you support the organization both from a new practice perspective and an operational perspective, which is where, the DevOps arena is now coming into play, and you're seeing more devs, expanding out and getting into more generalized approaches to applications because at the end of the day, people like Microsoft are factoring out the needs to understand code to the full extent, right? I mean, we've got frameworks, we've got deployment utilities, we've got all of these things that exist out in the world, that help us not have to get to the nth degree. I mean, when I went through school, I think I told you this in the past, I learned Borland C++. I had to write my windows, then Visual C Sharp came along and, I didn't have to worry about that. And, as the web technologies came along, I didn't have to worry about how much code I had to write. MVC came along, started abstracting things out of my view. And, it's created an avenue of heavy expansions for devs to where they don't have to be focused, and be an expert in specific areas. However, it's come with its own dual-edged sword as well, because with every abstraction layer that we put in play, we start losing the ability to understand why that abstraction layer is there. So that's kind of the thing we need to be cognizant of, and the thing that we need to focus on is that, devs need to understand why they don't do something or why they do something, over the fact now of having to write it, if you get my drift.
Yeah. I have arguments with architects and lead developers because they just by default they want to mandate certain frameworks without really identifying the rationale based on the context. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being difficult with people, but
Well,
it ends up creating more work for me. I'm the one in the trench actually doing it, right? Freaking ivory tower. Oh, I don't want to get
well,
started on that.
what I generally, run into, what I mentor people on is, think about it as like you repair your car or your bike, right? Does it really matter the brand of the tool that you actually use? Does it really truly matter whether it's a Stanley, whether it's a DeWalt or any of that stuff in order to do it? Or does it really matter that you get the job done? And that's kind of the point. When you look at frameworks are really nothing more than tools. And I think you and I have discussed this in the past, that they're just tools. Does it really matter what tool you actually use to go in? In some scenarios, it does, because when you ask yourself that question, you have to look throughout the organization and understand who else is using those tools, right? So, everything becomes a key facet to understand the environment that you're in, looking at the gaps, and going in. If you like a specific tool, but nobody understands how to use that tool or where it's at, or you're the only one that has that tool, they always have to come back to you to get that tool, right? So you always want to make sure that other people have that tool in their tool belt, when you're developing line of business applications. So in turn, you don't become the guy that has to be the guy for that app and create your own technical debt, as you go forward in the organization. You know what I mean?
Yeah, in my case, maybe I should refine, not necessarily a tool, but a framework. And so, what I find, because apparently I'm one of very few people that care about this, is uh, additional frameworks that aren't defaults when you spin up a Visual Studio session. I find that the majority of them, you have to perform a lot of ceremonies just to prove that your code works, right?
Right.
Leveraging SQLite, leveraging, there is a project where we used reactive extensions that's focused on C Sharp and mobile stuff. And like, it just, it polluted my domain logic, and I had to write way more code to that I just wouldn't have to do if I didn't use it. So the thing is like you say tools, and I guess I probably used the wrong term. When leveraging frameworks, I kind of feel like it's kind of like a pill, right? It may be absolutely fantastic for a specific area that you're working on, but the thing is, it's just like a pill, or medication. 9 times out of 10, it's going to have a side effect that you need to be conscious of, you need to be aware of. And that's where, like, a lot of people, I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just my reality. They don't consider the ramifications, they don't consider the side effects of the additional effort that we're going to have to do in this other area, if they leverage this. So this is just my frustration. Thank you for listening to me vent. Okay.
Well, the reason I say that it's a tool is, remember, it's there to solve a problem. I would look at it a bit different from a pill perspective, because a pill generally is there because other people prescribe it, and you got to kind of really go with it because you're trying to squat a symptom or something like that, which I don't really look at it in that facet, because really frameworks are just tools to solve a problem. Now, remember, and problem solving is always a perception of you, and you and I have discussed in the past, because people assume what something is, or people look at something from a perception perspective, and they go, I'm going to solve this by using this. I see a nail, I'm going to use a hammer. I see a bolt, I'm going to use a wrench or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's not, a pill to me is synonymous to you having to take something that is well beyond, um, just prescribed for you, and you have no real say in the matter. In frameworks, you kind of do have a say in the matter of how they're implemented and how they do it. You may not always understand it, because we always have to learn, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah. So here's the thing about Azure. Like I said yesterday, I actually went to my Kindle store, Amazon Kindle store, and I was going to buy a book on it because I was going to respond to the feedback that that a simple programmer had provided, because I'm like, yo, I need to level up. I want to continue making the money that I've been accustomed to making, or I want to make more money, and I'm finding it more and more challenging to prove my worth, right? But like when I took a sneak peek at some of these Amazon books, I realized something, and you go ahead and correct me. You're really good at that. Is this Amazon stuff, or not Amazon? This Azure technology, I think it's geared towards sysadmins. I'm not a sysadmin at all. Like I've never invested. Not saying that I'm not willing to, but it's a completely different world. It's a completely different ecosystem to me. And so, like, you start getting into networks and PowerShell, and like when I say it's a completely different ecosystem. It is a completely different ecosystem. Like, I'm not sure if I want to even go down that rabbit hole. Like, what was it like for you? Like, what? I'm just curious. It's foreign to me.
Well, let's look at it here, right? The way I can explain it probably the best is you have to look at Azure in the facet at which you want to continue working. If you're a dev, you're going to work with things like app services, logic apps, APIs, functions, things like that in Azure, right? So let's apply it to how we look at things today. When you're in an organization and you go deploy to IIS, do you really care what server it's on? Do you really care where that server exists? Do you really care who patches that server? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't
So,
know. It's just a mechanism
right.
that fills in a requirement to for other people to consume.
And now remember, Azure is the same bucket. Okay, you have platform as a service, you have SaaS, you have um, IaaS, you have a bunch of different things for infrastructure. So when you look at things from the perspective of how much you need to digest Azure as a dev, you're probably looking at things for looking at SaaS areas, like you want to do a logic app, or sorry, or you want to do a an app service or a website, or spin up a instance of SQL, use CRM Dynamics, use SharePoint, use something like that. That's probably the arena you're going to sit in from a dev perspective and not have to interact with it. Now, if you're looking at things from the perspective of an infrastructure, you may have to build out an ASD or an environment, or a bunch of different uh, uh, infrastructure components, because that's how your organization manages it, right? So you just have to look at it and think about the fact that you only need to digest as much Azure as you need to do to complete the work that you're at, right? When you read a lot in Azure, most of the companies that are moving to Azure are trying to span their networks to Azure. So in today's day and age, they still look at everything from a server based perspective and not really as a solution or bringing it back to its smaller space. So you may have a company that stands up a server out in a VM on Azure, because all they really understand is how to manage IIS, and they still want control over that server, where you don't really need to have that from the perspective of using an app service. You know what I'm saying? So a
Yep.
lot of it from an Azure adoption perspective is teaching people what infrastructure actually means, how you digest that. What does it really mean to spin up a website? Do you really need all that hardware in order to do so, or is the vertical scalability of the application much more important to you, and not having to manage that, right? So it really is, from the perspective, a big learning curve for people to kind of digest and take it in. And Azure's gone tenfold since the days I started using it. You have things now where I can go out and use resource management tools, and I can spin up entire networks in and out of seconds. I can go out and click a button and spin up an entire infrastructure out on Azure in a heartbeat. I can go out and click on a button and spin up a website with a back end. I can do a deploy of WordPress or Naomi or something like that. I can do these things that I don't have to go in and go, let me go find a server. Let me find out where I'm going to put it in my infrastructure. Let me make sure my firewalls are open. Let me do all of this stuff in order to get it deployed. So it's kind of making things simpler in the long term, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the bigger point behind it, Azure, and where it becomes a very big tool for people to learn, is think about a majority of the businesses out there are from small to medium range businesses, right? So when you look at that, think about doing a startup that you now no longer have to worry about that $50,000, $75,000 worth of hardware that you have to buy in order to bring your business up to support your online features, your exchange, your this, your that, in order just to keep the business lights on. Now you can just go out to Azure and order those pieces and not have to worry about who manages them anymore, because you don't need to hire that guy to manage that thing anymore. You know what I'm
Is,
saying?
is that really accurate though? I'm not challenging. I'm not challenging you, but someone still has to know how to manage that infrastructure, right? Like the sysadmin isn't going away, is he or she?
You know, you are correct. The sysadmin in the long run doesn't really go away, but it allows businesses to adopt things in a different way, if that makes sense. So if
Yeah.
I can come out now and I can spin up and go out to O365 and I can go ahead and provision out myself an exchange box of this, I don't actually have to immediately go out and get a guy that runs my infrastructure. Then I don't have to immediately go out and get me a dev, or I don't immediately have to go out. I can start focusing my business in the areas I need to make it grow before having to worry about snapping these guys in. Does that make sense? It's kind of a thing they put in place when you need to, not exactly having to get it up front.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So like, is there? This is a stupid question, but you have to realize that like this is foreign to me. Um, there's probably not as many AWS or Azure solution providers. I don't even know what the right title it is. There's less people that you're competing with in this space. Is that accurate, or you don't even care?
Yeah, well, the thing is that everybody solves the problem, and they refer to them as ISVs usually, which is independent software. So you kind of really look at what they're actually doing. So you can say that if I was in a healthcare or something like that, I'd have a fraction of a percent of competitors over here. But it really goes around the problem that you're trying to solve, right? You've got to remember, in a competitive nature, and when you go out with something that becomes more critical and it becomes more of a utility, you take away the fact that people, you know, handling one area of business. You now have the competition that's introduced in order to drive down costs for business adoption. So you're going to start looking at different companies being able to be adopted in the businesses that you probably would have never seen there in the past.
Okay. So this is what my strategy was, because this is my strategy for anything that I'm a virgin to. Is I look for the Microsoft certification, and there's a Microsoft certification for Windows Azure. And so my thought process was I'm going to get this Azure book that's for the certification. I'm going to spend the next probably 3 to 4 months consuming it. I'm going to take the practice test, just like what I did with WPF. I'm going to take this practice test or practice exam over and over and over and over every single day at a Starbucks or a Panera Bread until I can consistently hit a 90% or more. And then I'm going to march into some training facility and I'm going to get my certification. But I looked at the table of contents and I'm like, God damn, like all this is foreign to me. Like I'm a programmer. Like, damn it, Scotty, I'm a programmer. I'm not like a sysadmin. But
Right.
you said that no, you should only be concerned with the problem that you're trying to solve. But
Exactly.
I feel like you have to. I feel like you're expected. This whole imposter syndrome. When I apply for a position in which I list Azure as something that's my expertise, and maybe that's a flaw right there. I feel like I have to know it inside out if I'm going to be billing them at I don't know. Well, y'all probably bill them at like $115 an hour or greater, because I don't know people that work in that space. I just learned that you were going full throttle in it. So like,
Well, You only take it. You can digest as much Azure as you need. Remember that Azure is nothing different than how your organizational structures work, right? You had development, you have infrastructure. If you don't need infrastructure in the cloud, don't do it. Just be the consumer of the development services that you need to deliver your solutions. You don't have to be an expert in implementing infrastructure on Azure. That's not something that you can go into. You can become an architect on how to go about doing that. But at the end of the day, you can be an app dev that can do logic apps and APIs and functions and do all of these different things and know how to manage those without really having to understand how to set up an entire network structure inside of Azure using VMs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. This I'm going to make a transition now. You run a company called what's the name?
Webinology.
And you focus on what?
I focus on mobile, web, and Microsoft Stack implementations. That can go from CRM to SharePoint to Xamarin Mobile development to Azure to Azure hybrids to full Azure implementations to mentoring companies and startups on how to leverage Azure to cut costs.
Okay.
So it all depends on what I really need to do to solve a problem, because I'm very passionate about businesses adopting technology and businesses leveraging technology so that they can focus in on the things that they're really good at, rather than spending a lot of time in a technology arena that may not be their forte and having to weed through all of the good folks and the hacks that are out there, trying to drive a business or create a buck. So I like to see businesses thrive. I like to see them grow. I like to see them, enter the market and have a very good shake at it, at least with an understanding of how to pick the right person to solve that problem, if you get my drift.
And Microsoft recognized you as a MVP in that space, so you have even more proof, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know what else to talk about outside of Azure. You're in like your car or something on your way to a site, so I'm pretty content with how things just went.
Yep.
The last session, I was talking my last guest to death. That was a 2 hour, 40-minute conversation that we had. I had needed somebody to talk to, but yeah, yo, this is really cool. Thank you for like contributing. I guess maybe this is my last question is what resources should I look for based on your feedback of focusing on the problem that needs to be solved within the space that I'm familiar with, which is essentially like desktop and mobile application development. Like I just need a server, I just need a back end, a database, etc. So do I just go to MSDN, or are there specific books that I'm a book person, right? What would you recommend for just normal developers to get into that space and be productive? What can we consume?
Well, what I would do, and I'm more and believe devs like to read and do hands-on as well. So I'm one of those of pick your poison now. As you go through, start looking at things like, if you're doing mobile development and you want a quick transition, start looking at cloud services and API management. Start learning how those can help you develop applications. Start looking at Azure SQL. Look at Azure databases as a whole. The things that you can run so that you can tell how you want to back end those services. Looking at alerting hubs. Looking at event hubs. Looking at the things that you need to make mobile applications better, and then kind of span out from there. As I've stated in the past, a lot of this has to do with web and web development, and that's kind of the biggest key. I think is start learning to understand, how to move things across the internet, how to secure them, the things you need to do in order to, stand up services. How can you multi-home those services to where you can write it for a mobile app, but then you can expose it to a web app, and you can create a website or web integration into that, and then really start going down that path, if you get my drift.
Yeah.
So it's really focusing in, because where you can get lost in Azure is Azure has a lot of components in it. Azure has a lot of, and if you're getting into the realm of constantly, it can have you all over the place with that. So my suggestion is, somebody that wants to learn something, focus in on one thing at a time, and you don't have to become a quote unquote expert in it, but just become familiar enough about why you use it and why you need to use it and why it makes sense and how you implement it. And then you can kind of move on to the next one. And then as you get a lot of more tools under your belt, you can start looking at how do you make them work amongst themselves, and when do you section this guy off, or when do you use something like this. So it's really kind of finding your own way on how you want to implement something. I mean, the world's now getting to a point where you don't have to implement something in the exact same way all the time. You can use best of breed things now that they're consumable in a utility fashion. And you can use different things to now solve problems that you never really had before or never really were accustomed to. So it's really kind of finding your comfort point as a dev and figure out what makes sense for you to get these things to roll out. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Do you do you maintain like a technical blog to people? Do
Every
you Pluralsight or anything? Why is my dog hating on me right now?
Yeah, but I'm sitting down doing the same thing, dude. I've been one of those that I do so much mentoring, so much talking, so much community involvement because I'm passionate about seeing people face to face, like now. Um,
Mhm.
I'm not really a blogger type. I've tried. It's just very difficult. So I've made it a goal to start working on blogging a bit more and getting my blog up to date. But I'm really more of helping folks and getting folks to a good point in their life, interacting with them and walking a mile in their shoes and trying to really get them to understand, where they need to go. I think you've seen that. I do more personal interaction and more group interaction than I do just randomly blogging something out on the internet, because I don't know if that blog's really solving anybody's problem. So, I like to help. So
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, look, I learned a lot from this. Now I got to figure out how to act on it. So I'm gonna revisit the Kindle store. I'm probably gonna look up some YouTube videos on what I need to do because I mean, the user story for me is, I mean, I pay monthly. I don't pay monthly. I pay quarterly for I don't know. I don't even know. Do you call them an ISP? A host, a web host. I pay quarterly for a web host so that I can have access to a server with a SQL Server database. But I don't know. I guess that eventually I'm going to get clients that are going to have business models that may be affected by various surges or seasons, and maybe it makes sense to make sure that the infrastructure is in place so that I don't get phone calls at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, and yeah, let me talk about that really quickly. Has there been a significant difference in support from doing your typical maintaining a specific server, aka pet? That's what I hear analogy versus managing a cloud. Like, is it still the same amount of support, hands-on support that you provide to your clients, or is there
well,
a significant reduction in technical support?
it's a redundant on twofold, right? Not really from a dev perspective, because now I'm able to focus in on my code, but I'm not battling things such as some guy just patched this or somebody did that, and staying away from the standard. So it does make a little bit less. But let me put it to you this way, because I've got to get going here shortly. I'm actually on client site now.
Ah,
The here's twofold that I can give everybody. Go and make sure you get an MSDN from Microsoft. So get an MSDN, whether it's professional or whatever. Use the Azure credits that you get from it. Also go out to Dev Essentials. Look up Dev Essentials out on Bing, and they give you $25 a month from Dev Essentials in order to help you out with Azure and testing and creating dev environments for clients and such. You also get dev credit for having an MSDN. They give you so much Azure, so that you can help offset the cost of your Azure. And then also they've created some really cool areas that's like tryazuremarketplace.com that has some labs that you can go through that will show you how to implement different things from a hands-on perspective. It'll tell you how to implement a load balancer, or it'll tell you how to implement um, scaling out your applications and stuff like that. And it'll kind of walk you through and give you that hands-on, so that you can see how it actually works. And they put some pretty neat labs together. I don't know if they still give it away, but they were giving away drones with every time you completed one of the labs, so you could get a small micro drone from Crazy Drones. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know if they're still doing that, but they tend to do it. If you want to have fun, I think I was trying to remember if the rock paper scissors Azure contest is still out there, but they actually have contests where you can play rock paper scissors, by writing your own bot to play other bots in rock paper scissors. I thought that was pretty cool.
Okay.
Um, there are things out there that you can do to learn Azure besides looking at a book. I believe the books are really good, but the problem that you run into is they never really reflect holistically how clients want to implement infrastructure and the things they want you to do. So I really think if you bring it back a little bit and understand just how to get certain things done in it, according to what you need to do to support the clients that you have, that's a
Mhm.
good start. Then you can kind of branch out further from that. Once you got a little bit of that under your belt, and you get rid of the little faux pas of, I'm going to the cloud and what does that actually mean, because you can see it applied. So it's really some good.
Do you have any guest appearances coming up, whether it's in the state of Florida at like a Tech Ed or Code Camp or whatever? Can where I'll just leave it like that.
I know they have stuff coming up because we've had things throughout the area. It really depends on what you're focusing on. I mean, we had a CRM summit here. There's a user forum going on in Orlando, I believe, right now. There's just a bunch of things. You've got Orlando Code Camp, you've got Tampa Code Camp, you've got Southern Code Camp, which is run by Dave Noter down in Miami area. You've got Southwest Code, Southwest Code Camp, which is um, kind of up our way, but a little south of where I'm at. So there's a ton of code camps out the area. Now, what content they put there is yet another story. So I would just kind of check on the code camps in Florida and see what content's there, and kind of pick your which track you'd like to go on and stuff like that. So.
All right, Greg, you're at the client side. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking this. This is like really spontaneous, but yo, thanks for like contributing value, and like I'm trying to level up, so I really appreciate your guidance. And
Alrighty.
yeah, that's it. I'm gonna hit the stop broadcast button, and you can choose to hang up. I really do appreciate this, and I'm hitting the button right. Oh yeah. So your business name is Webinology, right? People can search for that. Are you on Twitter or anything? Do you want people to?
You can reach out to me at G Leonardo Leonardo on Twitter.
All right, cool. All right, thanks, Greg. I'm hitting the stop button right now.
All right, bro.